Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, the new administration, including Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, took decisive action to hold Venezuelan regime officials accountable for their illicit activity. The announcement was that 2 Venezuelan nationals were labeled as specially designated narcotics traffickers pursuant to the Kingpin Act, including Venezuela's second-in-command, the Vice President of Venezuela, and his frontman, López Bello. It also identified 13 companies owned or controlled by these individuals or other designated parties that pose a serious threat to U.S. national security as well as the U.S. global financial systems. These designations were long overdue, Mr. Speaker, and represent a significant first step in what appears to be a positive, fundamental shift in our policy toward Venezuela. Just yesterday, my colleague Mario Diaz-Balart and I met with Vice President Pence to discuss Venezuela and how Congress and the administration can work together to craft a positive agenda to help the people in Latin America suffering without democracy or human rights. Last week, Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey and I led a bipartisan and bicameral letter, together with 32 of our congressional colleagues, to the President, urging his administration to take immediate action against the Maduro regime for his illicit activity and for its gross human rights abuses. And while this round of sanctions target the illegal drug activities of these regime officials, this is just the tip of the corruption iceberg in Venezuela, Mr. Speaker. In fact, Venezuela's so-called executive vice president has facilitated drug shipments, has protected drug traffickers in Venezuela, has alleged links with the U.S.-designated foreign terrorist organization and Iranian proxy, Hezbollah. According to OFAC, the Office of Foreign Assets Control, the second individual also sanctioned is López Bello, who laundered drug proceeds and generated significant profits as a result of illegal activities. Holy Toledo. While these announced sanctions were a critical first step, it pales in comparison to the dire humanitarian situation that Maduro and his cronies have created for the people of Venezuela. Mr. Speaker, Venezuela has been on a downward spiral for years, and there have been bipartisan calls from Congress to take action in support of the Venezuelan people. Maduro's failed economic policies have the country with the highest inflation rate in the world, leaving his people without food, without basic necessities, without medical supplies. In most areas, hospitals and groceries have shut down due to lack of supplies, and the people of Venezuela are forced to ransack what is left of these hospitals and stores for their basic survival of their families. And how does the regime react when they see the suffering of their own citizens? They're lining their own pockets at the expense of the suffering of the Venezuelan people. An AP report showed that senior-level officials like Generals Rodolfo Marco Torres and Carlos Osorio are allegedly orchestrating fraudulent schemes with suspected shell companies to personally profit instead of bringing food to the people. Opposition leaders like Leopoldo López and Antonio Ledesma are still in jail or under house arrest. Leaders like Maria Corina Machado of the National Congress is still not allowed to travel outside her country. This is unacceptable, Mr. Speaker. Their so-called crimes, speaking out against the Maduro regime and standing up for democratic principles. The regime stifles all who stand for democracy and freedom in Venezuela. The opposition is vilified, is persecuted, and is arrested on false charges. We must show Venezuelans that their fight is not in vain, that their actions are seen, and that their cries are heard. Next on the sanctions list should be the judges and officers of these kangaroo courts in Venezuela who are behind this unwarranted administration and are responsible for the injustices and human rights violations. Mr. Speaker, this is what America is all about. We stand firm by our values, firm in our ideals, that we promote and defend them, and we try to have other parts of the world be enlightened in this way. Hope is dwindling quickly in Venezuela. As human rights violations multiply, now is the time to hold Venezuelan regime officials accountable, and we urge all responsible nations to join us in this struggle. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.